Stand by. Okay, that is muted. Let me double check all our participants. Looks like we do have one.
I don't think she wants to be promoted.
So Emily, I think you're fine right where you're at. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get that screen share so Christina can drive this presentation.
Okay.
You ready to call the meeting to order? Doing so, roll call.
Kristen Don, citizen member.
Doug Hunt, Commissioner.
Susan Woodruff, citizen member.
John Baird, citizen member.
Katie Jacobson, County Commissioner.
Tim? Could you introduce yourself?
Tim Johnson, County Administrator.
Christina Shearer, budget officer.
So that would be our lineup.
And that'll be that. And do we have any introductory comments, Doug?
No, I don't believe we do. I
Okay.
mean, the budget messages were read at,
Right.
excuse me, at the first meeting. We do have some presentations, but no messages per se.
Okay,
The documents that were read are part of the budget document.
good. Okay, do we have any comments, presentations? Sheriff? Okay.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Curtis Landers, Lincoln County Sheriff, and members of the Budget Committee. I wanted just to, after the last meeting and some comments, I think specifically what Chair Baird was talking about, some metrics to include. And we did include some this year and also last year's budget too. But what we did is we actually took those metrics out of our annual report that we provide annually. And one of the things that our team thought about when we got back from that meeting is just including our annual report from now on for the Budget Committee review ahead of time. And so I do apologize that it's just coming to you now, but I think in future years, we'll just start doing that to where, we published this out earlier because it is an annual report that we do on a calendar year and not a budget year. But it is the statistics that we use for the metrics. And then I know that we were talking about providing those stories that go with the message that comes out, and it really is inclusive in there. And then it will, we won't have to repeat the work. And then if you have any questions on it, we can go from there. So that's what I've included here. I'm not going to go through the whole annual report this time, but a couple of things I want to touch on that you probably already heard is just the difficulty for us and a lot of industries to hire and retain individuals especially for our certified positions in corrections and on patrol. And then not only when we do find people, but we also have the difficulty of the long time it takes to train somebody. From patrol, that's about a year to get somebody trained and on the road. So you can imagine if we're already shorthanded due to vacancies, and then we have to, find people, which is difficult, and then train. Somebody recently asked me, what kind of people are you finding? And when we do find people, they're exceptional people. It's just we're not getting the application pool that we once did, but the people that we do find are exceptional. We're not lowering our standards, I guess is what I mean by that. And I think that's crucial in any public safety. I don't think you want to start taking that road where you're lowering your standards when the public safety could be compromised at that point. I remember clear back when I was in college, one of the courses I took studied several locations that, off and on would lower their standards, especially larger cities, to get larger applicant pools. And years down the road, they were seeing, detrimental effects of that in the community, or having to fire people. And I think when we do find people, even as difficult as it is, we still want to make sure those standards are high, so we're not having to fire them, or worse yet, somebody gets hurt or harmed during it. In my message in the annual report, just again, touch on a couple things that, with being shorthanded, a couple of programs that we recently had, our COMET program, which is our community outreach mental health enhancement team, has been suspended. We really don't even have enough people to respond to emergency calls that are coming in. And that's one of the programs, along with the drug team that went away several years ago because of staffing levels, that we're just not able to do in order, we just need to respond to calls. I'm going to talk a little bit about our org chart here in a minute, but another statistic that I want to touch about that I know came up during the SLUT's budget meeting, but I believe all of you were listening in a little bit on the discussion that was occurring during that. And one of the statistics, a metric that we can actually look at for areas that have contracts compared to areas that do not have contracts, is service call response times. And I know in Walport, he was a counselor at the time, Dan Cutter, had mentioned that, or what are we getting? And then when he went to be city manager, he was asking me, what are we getting for our money? What can I show the constituents that, what are we getting for money? And, I scratched my head on that a lot to say, well, we respond for calls, we provide the hours, what am I getting? And one of the statistics that really came out to show what contract areas get is the response time to our emergency calls. And if you look, I believe it's on page 7 of that, you'll see that. And Walport has the best response time of anywhere in the county. They have a contract like SLET's, but theirs is more confined just to the city. So you got to contribute to having those extra deputies in those areas for 80 hours a week will contribute to a lower response time when the emergency calls come in. SLET's was second. They do have a contract, a little larger area though, because it's the entire fire district. And then Depot Bay, although it doesn't have an extended contract like Walport and SLET's, we do provide overtime coverage there. We provide several hours of coverage that they want, that they basically contract with us. And you see that their response time is down low too. Central is the only other one, but Central is close to where we are. You can just imagine that's going to be lower. And I think this is more for Walport and Yachats, but Yachats has the highest at 20 minutes. And I know there's always been that discussion between Walport and Yachats that they're paying for something that Yachats is contributing to. And you can see in the response times, that's really not true, that in the areas that we have general funds, specifically Yachats and our North County, it's our highest response time to those emergency calls. So I think having those contracts is definitely beneficial. It's one of the things that I've struggled with when we've been shorthanded, because contracts are still paying. And when we are shorthanded, how do I, and I believe it was Councilor Traxel from the city of SLET's that was talking about it during that meeting, that when we are short-staffed, when we don't have that coverage, how are we balancing that coverage? And I know if I have a contract, an agreement with somebody, I want to provide that service. But it really does come at a significant detriment to the other areas, because when we are short as many deputies as we currently are, if we fill those contracts, then the general fund areas, the rest of the areas of the county, obviously does not have the coverage that they maybe had before the contract. So it's really a balancing act that we have to do, especially as short as we've been lately. And those were a couple of things I wanted to point out. I'm definitely happy to answer any questions. I know you're just looking at this. You can definitely contact me anytime if you have questions about some of these statistics or metrics that we're putting in here. The other thing I wanted to talk about is our organizational chart, and that's this piece here. And the reason why I brought this up is because it actually is, I know we put it on our website for the public to review and see where all the positions are, what their money's being spent on. But this is one document that I keep updated for myself. It really helps me to illustrate what we're doing, especially in the patrol division, which is that far left side. to look at how we are allocating our resources and just, exactly what we're trying to talk about with the contract. I know Commissioner Hall had a question about, the COMET and the drug team, and I'm going to kind of illustrate that a little bit. But if you look down that list, our Marine deputies, our Wildport deputies, our SLETS deputy, our Forest deputy, and our School Resource deputy are all contract areas that are not necessarily Wildport SLETS, but the other ones aren't not necessarily 100% funded by outside sources, but the majority of the cost is funded, is contributed by revenue that we get that isn't the general fund. So if you take those out, those 8 positions, you can see we really have 12 general fund positions and then 2 detectives that basically provide the rest of the service. So that's where I'm going back when I'm talking about if we have to make sure we're fulfilling all those contract areas. And then as I talked last time about being, basically 10 deputies short, you can see where that comes out of. And how difficult it is to balance that around. And then it's again, like SLETS is saying that they don't have that named person. Are we getting our hours? And questions like that continue to come up. And one thing that I really strive to do is uphold our commitment to those contracts. But again, then those other areas are suffering too. The other part of that is that COMET down at the bottom. That's that community outreach mental health and enhancement team that we've had and have suspended. And I know that when Commissioner Hall talked about it, she was talking about being a deputy that went in there. Really, that is, if we go back through and look over the years how it happened when Lint dissolved and was suspended, we actually had 3 detectives at that point. And while she is correct that it was just a patrol deputy that went in there, not a detective, the position's really coming from one of those detective positions. It's really the Lint position that we moved to COMET since we didn't have a Lint team. And so if we were completely full and still had COMET, we would have 2 detectives and not a Lint position. However, I do know, and talking with the chiefs, that the cities of Newport and Lincoln City have both their budget committees and city councils have both approved adding positions for the drug team. They heard the presentation from Judge Bockhart and have made those commitments to basically fund those teams. So I've been, with the COMET, it's not just our position that is struggling to find people in there. It's also behavioral health. Mental health is one that really pulled their position first. And so it's hard to have a COMET team, which was a deputy and a counselor that were working together in the community, which was a very beneficial program. It was something that was, I really enjoyed seeing that we're able to do here. But I can definitely understand from their perspective and then ultimately in ours as far as where you have to put your priorities. And while I definitely want to see that program come back, it's just not feasible at this point without adding more positions and then adding them and getting them staffed so that we can adequately do that. So I've made the decision when we get full staff that we will help contribute a 3rd detective and to the drug team and help combat the large amounts of fentanyl and overdoses that are occurring in our county. A couple of reasons for doing that. I think there are other funding opportunities that we can look at to get COMET staffed up more than there probably are for drug teams. So I think prioritizing the drug team is essential to what we're trying to do. And quite frankly, there are a lot of drugs occurring in the county, and a lot of drug houses are showing up that we are seeing and just don't have the knowledge, the experience, and the resources to combat that at this time. I do have a couple questions for the budget committee, but before I ask those, I just didn't know if you had anything on my brief presentation that I had with those 2 things before I asked just a couple of questions of the budget committee.
They answered some questions I had, so
Okay.
thank you.
Excuse me, Chair, we've got a hand raised here by Commissioner
Okay.
Jacobson.
Hi, thank you, Sheriff Landers. I turned off my video because I was having some connectivity issues, so I wanted to make sure I could hear and not get frozen. Thank you for that. I think it was a helpful presentation. There's one little place you lost me, and I just wanted to make sure I understood. So you said, once you got, staff back and able to successfully recruit and get everyone trained, I didn't quite catch if you said bringing back the Lint person, a 3rd of a Lint person, or bringing back COMET was the priority. I kind of got lost there. Which one comes first?
The priority would be the drug team to help with the Lincoln City and Newport's commitment that they've made to have that team back in place in the county and then look for other resources or other funding sources that would put Comet back in there. I mean, the best of both worlds is I'd have both. Ultimately, they're two completely different programs, but they're so beneficial to the community. But at this point, I think we really need to prioritize the drug team and getting that back, which is still probably, I know the other agencies are not, we're not going to have one up come July 1 at all. So it's still going to be several months, but at least I know in our monthly discussions with the chiefs, we are working toward that direction of putting the pieces together for that team again.
Okay, and I thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure I understood. I have some ideas of alternative funding as well. So why don't you and I circle around together and chat about that at some point?
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you.
Chair, we also seem to have a hand raised here from Nicholas. Is that staff or constituents?
He is one of our deputies. I think he wants to talk in the public comment position, if I understand correctly.
Okay, can you hear?
I can, yes.
So that portion.
Yeah.
Will chair.
Yeah,
wait for
let's go
later?
right ahead.
Okay. All
Yes,
right,
sir.
chair says go for it.
All right. Good evening. My name is Nicholas Vale. I represent the Lincoln County Deputies Association as the Patrol Vice President. The LCDA represents, as you all probably know, the non-supervisory employees of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. We serve as corrections deputies, patrol deputies, nurses, support service specialists, animal services specialists, pretrial specialists, kitchen staff, and many more. As you know, the LCDA is currently in labor relations negotiations with the county, and I wanted to take the time to make you guys and the general public aware of the importance of our current negotiations. For the LCDA, the focus of these negotiations is recruitment and retention of personnel, with the goal of making the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office a place where highly qualified candidates will choose to apply and remain dedicated to the safety of our community for a career. Presently, the Lincoln County Budget Committee budgets provides for 12 general fund deputies for the patrol division. I've worked in the patrol division since June of 2015. In that time, I've seen 29 deputies from our patrol division leave our office, and only 4 of them have actually retired from law enforcement. The rest have moved on for various reasons, but overwhelmingly, the message has been that the package we're able to offer isn't competitive with other opportunities, both in and out of our community. This problem with retention has created cascading issues for the staffing of the Sheriff's Office, because every new hire must be managed by the existing and experienced staff through 16 weeks of the state required basic police academy. It's often extended to 18 weeks or more because of holiday closures, and COVID delays and restrictions have further delayed basic police academy class progress and limited the number of new classes available to hire and place new deputies. Additionally, recruit deputies are required by the state to complete a field training and experience program lasting approximately 15 more weeks, during which field training officers spend each and every workday handling calls for service with recruits one-on-one, to include multiple reporting requirements and continuous documentation of the recruit's progress and need for remedial training. In all, the initial training required to release a recruit deputy to handle calls for service with only routine administrative supervision is expected to last more than 7 months, during which existing staff are working outside their normal patrol, training, and administrative duties. In speaking with our administration, the average newly hired entry-level patrol deputy costs approximately $115,000 to hire, to the point that they can take calls for service independently. This figure, $115,000 per recruit deputy, does not include training or equipment, only hiring, salary, and healthcare costs for the first year of employment. This means that the taxpayer cost of the recruit deputies hired to replace the 29 patrol deputies lost during my tenure since June of 2015 is at least $3.3 million, and significantly more when the cost of training and equipment is taken into account for each deputy. Additionally, this number does not take into account other Sheriff's Office divisions. Corrections, support services, and the others have experienced similar turnover during my time with our office, costing millions more in taxpayer dollars wasted on lost potential. You may recall, as Sheriff Landers just spoke about, that he's cultivated community support to provide for additional patrol funding through contracts with the State Marine Board, private timber companies, municipalities, the United States Forest Service, the LCSD schools, and a tax district. However, the county's inability to retain employees has impaired the office's ability to staff these positions, even with the additional funding in place, which has and will continue to result in the cancellation of contracts and lost revenue streams. My point is that the hiring package Lincoln County is negotiating with the LCDA right now is incredibly important to the future of law enforcement in our community. Of the 12 funded patrol deputy positions, currently 6 are held by recruit deputies. 6, meaning 50% of the funded road level call for service taking actual working workforce of the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office Patrol Division are unable to function independently to service the county's 1,194 square miles and roughly 50,000 residents, not taking into account the summer influx of vacationers. This reduction of staffing to minimums, continual turnover, and last year's practice of delaying the hiring of funded positions, the so-called vacancy savings, are creating unnecessary burnout, wasting the taxpayers' money, and taxing the employees' physical and mental health. The reason I'm here
Excuse
today.
me a moment. Excuse
Yeah.
me. Would you wrap this up in about 2 minutes?
I will. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. What I'm asking the budget committee members for today is a serious commitment to the recruitment and retention of, a serious investment in the recruitment and retention efforts of the sheriff's office. Currently, negotiations with the LCDA and the county have been slow and unproductive, with the county having failed to produce a real compensation package counterproposal since the LCDA made our first offer in January of this year. Since then, the LCDA and the country have watched unprecedented inflation, economic growth, and numerous other counties with federal funding received to settle law enforcement negotiations with the same goal of retaining staff and promoting health and safety in their communities. I implore you, on behalf of the existing LCDA members and our community, not to impair our ability to hire new employees, to invest in us, to invest in the safety of Lincoln County, invest in the quality of life of the people who choose to make Lincoln County their home. Help us make Lincoln County a place that people can work, live, and thrive without fear of criminal activity, and with the knowledge that their law enforcement is not only well-trained and well-staffed, but also invested in their Lincoln County community for years to come. Millions of dollars have been wasted in staff turnover. Please, as budget committee members, invest those future tax dollars in retaining the people you've chosen to serve the most vulnerable people in our communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your input.
So I did have a couple of questions to follow up. One actually is a segue in what Deputy Vale was talking about. With the vacancy savings that we experienced over the last 2 years, I guess I know that there's been some questions and discussion about it, but I don't know what's built into the budget. Are we building in a vacancy savings like we did the previous year, or are we having no vacancy savings so that we don't need to consider and can fill all our vacancies that we can?
I'm going to have.
I would defer to the budget director.
The budget is, as proposed, does not include any provision for vacancy savings.
That should make your life easier.
That would make it a lot
Sheriff?
easier. I just wanted to kind of point out that it has been a struggle over the last 2 years. It's not just that, but that is a contributing factor. And this one other thing I just want to put over, I was talking about burnout in the first 9 months of this budget year. We estimate that between the jail and patrol, it's spent about $500,000 just in overtime costs, and that's not counting what the deputies have put in for compensatory time. The other question I had is referring back to decision packages. I know that working with County Minister, Mr. Johnson, on several of them, but this is one that I think maybe has not been approached, and I just wanted to discuss it real quickly because it may have been overlooked as possibly a personnel issue, which it technically is, but it's not adding any additional personnel. This is on our budget request to reorganize the jail health team back to where it was a couple of years ago. A few years ago, we, as we still are, struggling to find nurses. We were budgeted for 4 registered nurses in our jail team. We were struggling to find those positions. We have 2 excellent ones right now that have been with us for a long time, but finding those additional 2 was difficult. So we decided to try a different program and remove the registered nurses and went to a 2 certified medication aides, where we'd have at least people there to provide medication to the adults in custody and provide that assistance to the nurses. And we actually had budgeted in with some of the savings of that as a part-time RN, that we thought maybe finding a part-time RN to fill in on different occasions would be beneficial and easier to do. That program didn't work. We never did find any CMAs to fill those positions. And it's in talking with Lieutenant Russell and the medical team at the jail, as hard as it is to find personnel, if we needed to choose who we could find, we would rather find 4 nurses to fill those spots. And so we wanted to revert back to where it was before. That would basically eliminate the 2 CMA positions, eliminate the part-time RN position, eliminate the 3.5% that was going to increase for the RN, because technically they were going to have to provide supervision over the CMAs, and then add back in the 2 nurses. But the total request in doing all that is $47,737 for the next year. Now, I also know that if you told me today, we're not going to be able to find 2 nurses to start July 1. So obviously there would be probably built in at least the first year vacancy savings built into that even if we went right to get the nurses. But I just wanted to point that package out to see if that had been considered or where that was on the table, so we would know how to proceed further.
The chair just wants you to know that Jacobson has her hand up.
Okay.
That may have come before Curtis started, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Katie?
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions, Sheriff Landers, if you could answer, actually several. So one is in response to the public comment that we received, which was mostly focused on patrol. I guess I have a question for, kind of about being competitive and offering competitive packages as part of, recruitment and retention. My question is really about non-deputy positions. So, animal care workers and kitchen staff and those types of workers. I haven't, just looking at requisitions coming through, I haven't seen as many vacancies come through on that end. And I'm just curious if we're, fighting one battle with just deputies, or if we're fighting 2 with support staff.
Great question, Commissioner. We don't seem to have as difficult time finding people for our other positions. We've recently filled a support services position in our support services division. It was a search, but we found somebody within the first time we went out to look for somebody. We actually, in the second one, had somebody that had left, went to another county, and they actually came back. So we're actually seeing that. And we actually had that happen with our detective spot too. Somebody actually left, thought the fire scene was going to be better, and they actually have recently come back. So that's good to see that people are seeing that maybe the grass isn't greener on the other side, and coming back and realizing this is an excellent place to work. And then also at the animal shelter, when we've had openings there, we seem to get a good pool to select from there. The other piece of it is the training requirements just isn't as long in those positions as it is for a certified position when you have the academy and everything involved. I think another position is for our in our kitchen in the jail to have our food services manager position. We filled that with an excellent candidate and are so glad that we did. And it was on the first try going through there too. So it's really those certified positions that we seem to struggle with. And then also just the time constraint that we have with the extended delay for the training.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to knock on wood that we're doing okay there. So the second question I have is kind of getting back to vacancy savings. I'm glad to see that is not built into our budget. I just think there's a better way to do services, but I think something you said at our M team budget meeting that was very helpful, even though it's not, built in as a required percent, a required length of time. You were talking about our M team that, if you had a vacancy today, someone's leaving, you were saying that it still takes several months before that person is on payroll. So even though it's not built in, I just want to know that doesn't mean that there's not some type of vacancy savings there. So not so much a question, I guess, as a statement. And then I guess when it comes to healthcare workers, how many healthcare workers for our average jail population? And I know we're down, from pre-COVID population, but how many healthcare workers are we required to have?
Required, probably zero. But I mean, I don't think we're required to, we're required to provide obviously medical care, but I think you can do that by contracting, other ways to obtain that services that other counties have done. We've actually explored contracting. It's just, we haven't had people return our calls, or the cost is prohibitive to what we're doing. Like I said, we have 2 excellent nurses that are working for us in there. I wish we could find 2 more like that and we'd be fine. In our CIS, when we
We're
went
required to provide the care, but it doesn't,
Absolutely.
the requirements don't say per X number of adults in custody, X number of hours. We're just required to make sure that people are taken care of.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
In
It seems
a
like
nutshell.
and kind of switching, tactics here, that we have flexibility in how we try to provide that care, whether it's, you had tried CNAs and that kind of stuff, so that there is some flexibility there.
We really thought that was going to help, not that it would get 4 nurses on scene, but having flexibility to look at a different program that we thought where there were going to be an abundance of applicants to come in. And it's really having more people that are overseeing that, so that the deputies aren't, with all their other duties, having to issue medication, having to do all the screenings that come in. And like I was going to say, our recommendation from our insurance provider, CIS, is that we have 24/7 medical coverage in the jail. That is what is accepted and ideal for a jail of our size, is to have 24/7 medical provider.
So that's not a requirement, it's a recommendation, but there is a recommendation from insurance have that. And I guess the other thing I just wanted to say, for the public's benefit, when it came to healthcare in the jail, something I learned when I was a new commissioner that I found fairly shocking, and still do, was that by federal law, adults in custody cannot be on health insurance. And so this is the care that is provided. There is no OHP or any other carrier that they may have had prior. And so, having that care is really important, because there isn't, by law, they can't have health insurance. So
that is absolutely correct. Once they get arrested, that there any kind of assistance that they did have it goes away. And so that all falls on to the general fund, basically, to provide that care. There has been some movement over the last couple of years to change that, at least for the pretrial population. I know that we've had other sheriffs that have gone back to DC to testify on that behalf. There's been movement. I'm hoping that continues to go through and gets passed on the federal level, because that's where it's at, that it gets stopped. When they put that in place years ago, it was supposed to be a deterrent, that I don't want to get arrested because I'm going to lose my benefits. But that's really not the case anymore. And what we're seeing is that burden of those healthcare just falls on another source of funding to make that happen. And it's not a deterrent. People aren't saying, well, I better not do this because I'm going to lose my services. When they do leave custody, we try as best we can to get them signed back up again, so that they can receive the care that they need. But it's just interesting, because even when that care is suspended, when they do come to jail, it seems like that's when they need the most treatment. That's when we have to provide that care, and they realize that there's a lot of things that they need to take care of. And it's a population at the jail that just requires, you might see, well, geez, even if you're full at 161 people, 4 nurses seems like a lot, but the majority of the people that are in jail require some sort of care, and that's what we need to provide.
And Director Scheer, I think maybe it got cut off before you had an opportunity to answer the question, if this change back to try to hire 2 additional nurses rather than CNAs, if that is captured in the current proposed budget, or if it's not captured.
It is not captured.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like Cindy Bruce on her hand out.
Okay, Cinda?
Good evening. Hey, Sheriff, I was just wondering, are any of the medical costs passed on to the inmates?
As far as the treatment that they get while they're in custody?
Yes.
Not necessarily. There is some, and I might have, she didn't run out that door. Have Russell come up and answer how that is actually handled.
Oh, I didn't mean to start something big. I was just wondering.
She's been
I'm sorry.
wanting to come up and talk.
For the record, Jamie Russell, Lieutenant Jail Commander. So Cinda, yes and no. We do not deny any level of service for our custodies based on the ability to pay. We do charge a $10 copay for medications per bubble pack. The meds come in a bubble pack. If they have to go to the hospital, if they have to go to the dentist, the doctor, those charges are charged against their commissary account. But again, they can go into the negative for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And eventually it is turned over to the Department of Revenue and we collect little bits on that here and there. But we never deny services based on the inability to pay.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Cindy?
I might have a tough question about a bus or something.
I had a little bit of knowledge that some of those costs were passed on. I was trying to help you, Sheriff.
Oh, thank you. I knew that Lieutenant Russell I knew that it was close, that it was kind of yes and no, but I don't remember how much of the cost was actually passed on.
That was
Great,
a
great
team
question though, Cindy.
that was a team sheriff question.
I know. Thank you.
So I had a question. You mentioned that they lose their insurance when they're arrested and that you try to help them get back on something. So do you have any feedback as to what kind of, extra costs or penalty they pay when they try to get back on? Are their
I don't think
rates
there's
a
any
lot
cost to
higher?
that. Yeah, I don't think there are any costs. It's kind of a benefit to them that we make sure that their services are restored when they leave, since someone may not realize that it ended. And then if they need something when they get back out in the community, then we want to make sure that they have that ready to go.
Well, I
Plus,
wasn't thinking of it from your end. I was thinking about the insurance companies taking advantage of knowing,
Yeah.
the situation. And then kind of like your car insurance, if you have a wreck, then
Yeah.
your rates may go up. But that doesn't seem to be the case in this case.
And I guess it's not all, private insurance is still, and it's just the public assistance, the Medicaid, the Medicare, Oregon Health Plan. Those are the ones that actually get, if somebody comes in, if somebody comes in, if I got arrested, I hope the county would keep my services going until at least they hired me.
But there are some, and we do on occasion get somebody in who is either on a parent's insurance still or has their own private insurance. And there are some companies that have very specific language in their coverage that says if you are incarcerated, you are not covered under the insurance.
Okay.
But with the Oregon Health Plan, we do work with our custodies to get them back enrolled prior to release. We have historically worked through a person at Health and Human Services, but we are actually in the process through a pretrial team of getting a pretrial person authorized through the state to be able to turn those services back on for our custodies who are getting out.
And we'd be, if we are able to, if it's it's changes to the bill are there and we're able to keep that the Oregon Health Plan, Medicaid, Medicare, whatever it is going, we be able to provide a lot better service, not better service, more services to them. Right now, we basically, the basics are what we provide in there to keep them healthy while they're in custody. That's what we're required to do. So there's not a lot of other things that may be beneficial to them, but we just, can't provide that with the funding that we have for that.
I will say there was a legislative change, 5-10 years ago that reads, if you have somebody who is in custody and is hospitalized for more than 24 hours, then Medicaid will pick up and cover the remainder of the bill.
They would be hospitalized though at the hospital and not in our facilities, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. So when we get them back with 23 hours, it's a deal for us.
Timing is everything.
So I have a procedural question about your ask as far as the $47,000. I don't know. We've just heard about it, so doesn't seem like something we can actually vote on, but so what's the process for getting it considered going forward?
For the purposes of this committee, it would require you to direct staff in your motion to adjust the approved budget to include that. In such, we would need to identify the funding that would be used for that, because as of the
Where it
moment,
comes
we
from.
have a balanced budget. And so, yeah, I mean, you have the ability to adjust the budget to include this package through this committee. You just have to tell us how you want to pay for it.
Go ahead. Where's Katie?
I actually was asking pretty much the same question as Susan. Thank you.
We've adjusted the budget at this level, but as the budget director's already pointed out, it's it's a two-step process. If you're going to change the expense side, how do you change the revenue side? Or reduce expenses in another area? So
Sheriff, do you have any idea where that money
But our
might come
budget,
from?
No. I don't offhand, no.
I mean, I know on a city level, we would take it from a contingency fund.
well, that's always an option, but we need to have a discussion on our contingencies, because the general fund contingencies have been dropping dramatically. And we'll get more information on that. So, well, all of these expenses or changes in the budget certainly have some importance. The challenge we face is how do we pay for it? And I guess, given the opportunity, I'll go back to the comments by the president of the Deputies Association. This budget does not include any expected changes in the compensation packages for the deputy DAs. So any ideas on how we might pay for those?
Not
the
just a moment, not the DAs, the LCDA
Okay.
bargaining group.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Whoever he spoke for. I got my acronyms. So, I mean, how do we pay for it?
I guess not being that familiar with all the pots of money there are here and there, since there's so many at the county level. But I just would like to see it, the consideration at least of it, get in motion, because I mean, I don't see how we can, actually vote on it when we just have it in front of us without knowing, where it's going to be funded. But I think it has merit for consideration, and I don't know what the process is for that.
Well,
Kristen,
So I have a question. Do we know if in the future, like, could we appoint saying if you give it to the discretion of the sheriff's office to come up with X amount of vacancy savings to cover X, but you're not like forced to do vacancy savings? I mean, if you're
But
already.
they're not in the
Yeah.
budget.
And again, it's not going to be 47,000 at least the first year, because we're not going to have two nurses working as of July 1. So it's going to be less than 47,000. That's just the total cost if they were here for the full year. So there's already going to be built in some, and I don't know how long it's going to, I mean, we've already probably, this year, we haven't had those two positions filled at all this year. So I mean, there's even savings from this year, but I know that's included already, even though we saved it this year to add it to next year's budget. But I think that's already been accounted for.
It has.
Somebody else.
And the other comment I would make is, while it's definitely not only feasible, but probable that this action would be budget neutral in this fiscal year, when you're dealing with positions, you always need to consider roll up into the future years, particularly in light of the unknown related to the LCDA contract.
And it's not adding positions. Again, there are two positions there. They're just not the positions that we desire.
Right, but it's going to be this on top of the increased
Yes.
cost, the presumed increased costs. Yeah.
Which compound year over year. So, I might offer a suggestion. Certainly the process would be that this committee, well, we have the ability to amend or adjust this budget, but the committee can approve the budget, which then forwards it to the Board of Commissioners for adoption. There would be the opportunity at that time to make adjustments or amendments if the Board of Commissioners so desires. So that might be a way to allow time to, at least from my standpoint, get a report on how this change could be incorporated into the budget and what the long-term impacts might be.
And 47,000 to your point is small compared to our large budget over the year as far as what we'll save at the end of the year. I can almost. I can probably
We still have to balance it.
Still have to balance, yeah. So, you know, and again, then it's just the future years that if we build that in this year, then when they come around next year, it'll be put into those costs. That's what is really, so for this year, I have no doubt we can put those positions back in place and cover the 47,000. It's the future years that when it's built back in, that the committee and commissioners need to take a consideration.
Commissioner
Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm supportive of doing this. I think what everyone has already said, it's just finding the resources to do that. And, you know, one thought I had, maybe a question for Tim, you know, we have not yet finalized our ARPA money or ARPA money for short. And, you know, I guess my question is there anything in your regular budget that, you know, equipment or something that we could maybe yank out of that and pay for with ARPA funds? So maybe just, you know, time to really sit down and see if there's some stuff we can move over, you know, one-time funds or something might be a possibility. I know that we moved some of your budget requests for new radios and stuff over into ARP funds. You know, maybe there's something else that can be cleared up. That was just my initial thought.
Yeah, that was the only one that wasn't cleared up that I wanted to address tonight. So
I don't think your tasers we could use for COVID recovery money. I think that maybe that was the other issue as well, is my understanding, but Tim can speak to that better than I can.
Chair, Lady Danforth has a hand up. I'm not sure if it came up. Wow, I think it did while Katie was talking before she addressed him. So do you want to move with that or go with Tim?
Well, could we see if Mr. Johnson has a response? I believe Commissioner asked the question of him, and then we can go to Katie rather than have that question hanging. I'm certainly willing to hear the DA.
Okay.
Thank you. Relative to ARPA, it's been difficult with the final guidelines as issued by Treasury for personnel, particularly over trying to sustain personnel issues. This money will go away in 2 years, and if you implement a program that is not sustainable, how do you then subsequently fund it moving forward? And that is the dilemma. It is well used for the items identified for technology, enhancements, software, remote hybrid meetings, as we're having this evening, a host of other issues associated with one and done activities. But it becomes very difficult and is understood that there's no way that we're able to use those dollars for a sustainable program.
Any other comments on this?
I guess my only comment is just we tried a program too, and I think if we had known in the future, we probably would have stuck with the nurses, which we would have still had the funding for that at this point too. So I just want to point that out, that we're not trying anything. We're not trying to move something that wasn't here just a couple of years ago. Also, just as a point, make sure that's clarified that we actually reduced some of the budget a couple of years ago, tried a program to get additional medical personnel here. But I don't think I ever would have attempted that if we had known that it didn't work. We couldn't resort back, because 4 nurses is ideally what we would prefer to have to cover the jail adequately with that coverage.
The district attorney have a question?
Lady?
Or comment?
Lady, I'm Trying to get you unmuted here. I think you should be able to talk. You can hear us. Are you still with us? Well, it's kind of hard to ascertain when you can hear us, but I have asked to, oh, something may be happening. She seems to be gone now, so I'll keep an eye out for her, okay?
Okay.
So I have a couple of questions or comments. First of all, the jail situation and healthcare or medical care is really a critical issue. I sit on the CIS board. I'm one of 2 county commissioners on a 10-person board. And I can tell you the greatest losses and the most rapidly increasing area of losses is jail deaths. Sadly, our county is not immune to that event. And so I certainly have some concerns about the level of health care that is available in the jails. So I will be very interested in the possible nuances that you've suggested, Sheriff. So that for the record. Second of all, I'll direct this to Administrator Johnson. In our negotiations, are we not looking at comparables for similar sized counties? Certainly we can't compete with King County in Seattle or Los Angeles County in California, but we do try to compete with counties that are of a similar size within our state. Is that a fair overview of the situation?
That's correct.
So when we talk about issues of retention and that sort of thing, certainly one of the factors is competing with larger metropolitan areas, larger counties that have budgets that are different than ours. Is that fair?
It is. I think one of the dilemmas that smaller communities like ours have, even larger communities where I have been from, be it San Diego or Seattle or even Portland, Sacramento, that the marketplace moves people. And no matter whether you start at an entry level and have the opportunity to move up, what we do note is that people will move on from larger organizations to even larger organizations, or maybe move to a smaller community where they have been elevated to a higher position within the context of the organization and are receiving pay, or maybe greater pay, or a position that they're more interested in achieving within their profession. So there's a variety of reasons why that does occur, and it's just what I have had to understand professionally is that is just part of the disruption that occurs in management, and it's one of the things that we have to accept. But I think there's things that we can do to enhance that, but it has existed before we ever had this thing called the Great Resignation, and will probably continue thereafter.
So the challenges that we're currently facing really aren't a reflection of the attitude of the county or the commissioners. It's really a reflection on the economic situation that we're all trying to adjust to. Is that fair?
Well, I think the first part of that is, again, remember, people do different things for different reasons, and it's not always related to money. It may be related to the organization, their professional opportunities to work on something that they want to pursue. It may be a change in due to family and requirements associated with that. It may also be because the organization that they would like to work for offers something more related to educational opportunity, that at a point in time within somebody's professional career, that's what they need for a period of time. There's a variety of reasons why people will move jobs and move on. I think the most important thing, as I've suggested to the management team, is that we look at our environment and try to ascertain what some of those issues are, go back and look at for those reasons, for those departures, and not just necessarily the sheriff's office, but across the county and what we're witnessing.
Thank you.
Question for Tim, or is it for the county? Do we do exit interviews with employees when they are resigning?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
So do we have anything more?
Jacobson.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Jacobson.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to, without taking us too much in the weeds here, I just wanted to provide a couple of comments based on our county manager's response. And I don't agree with everything that was said, because I think that, you know, comparables compare a salary, they don't compare cost of living. And I think a big issue we have in recruitment and retention employees here is housing. And so maybe there is some comparable counties in terms of salary and services provided, but it's very difficult to find housing here. And even though you may have a comparable salary, you may be paying twice or three times as much in another county, or twice or three times as much here in this county. If you can find housing, then you may be in other places. So I don't think it's just for our ambitions. I think we've had many people who want to work here, maybe want to stay here, but there's some personal goals. And I know, Tim, you have struggled with this personally in trying to purchase a house here. So I think, you know, I think comparables provide a part of the story, as does people kind of intentions for their career. But I think housing and childcare services play a big role, and recruitment and retention as well.
But in fairness, aren't those issues really predominant throughout the state of Oregon?
I mean, they certainly are, but there is certain counties that, you know, for example, did not qualify for FEMA housing after fires because they had enough market rate housing available. So there is places where you can, you know, find some market rate housing more available than there is here.
I work for the state of Oregon. I would say we're having the same issues with recruitment as far as housing and childcare are the main two deterrents for people coming to this community. So.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments?
I don't know when it's appropriate, but I know that the budget officer has a presentation on reserves. It's something that I asked her to prepare for this meeting.
Okay.
When you talk about the general fund and reserves, I think there are some reasons to be concerned. So whenever the chair would like, I would ask that presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate your input.
Real fast.
Is it?
Well, it doesn't. Let's take it over. I'll get back to you just a sec. Stand by.
Yeah.
Back to you.
All right, let me skip through this. I had prepared just some basic overview of the budgets, just in summary, so that we had some context for what we were dealing with here. But for the total budget, there's a series of charts that shows how we spend the Lincoln County budget. 26% is general government, 30% is contingency and reserves, health and human services, 19%, public safety, 18%, community services, 7%. Again, this is all funds. Sorry. That same all funds budget broken down by the type of expenditure that we do, personal services, materials and services, capital, transfers, debt service, and contingency. You see is the second chart. So it just shows the slightly different breakdown. When we move to the general fund,
Before we move to the general fund, would it be fair to say that the contingency and reserves of 30% is very adequate, but it also includes a substantial amount of reserves that are in the road fund?
yes, that is an all funds reserve. So it includes funds that are in the capital projects fund, roads fund, self-insurance fund, other funds. The general fund specifically is broken down 33% general government, 47% public safety, 6% community services, and 14% reserves. I want to stop and pause there for a second. We toss around percentages a lot for contingency reserves. The 14% represents 14% of the total general fund. The board contingency goal is 17% of the operating expenditures of the fund. And so this budget does represent 17.1% of operating expenses. So that contingency percent goes up when you're talking about just materials and services and personal services. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
So again, the general fund by category, you can see is driven largely by personal services, 61%, 23% materials and services, a tiny amount, it doesn't even account for a whole percent of capital, transfers out, debt service, and again, that 14% reserves. But again, that is 14% of the total fund, not just the operating. So under general government, we have the Board of Commissioners, elections, clerk, assessment and taxation, planning, economic development, public works, county attorney and law library, surveyor and corner preservation, administrative services, treasury services, capital projects, property management, and basically any other general fund that doesn't fit another category. In the general government category, 21% is made up of personal services, materials and services. And you'll see, again, this reserve is very large here, and that is mostly the road fund, self-insurance fund, and capital project fund. General government in just the general fund, again, 65% personal services, 32% materials and services, a little bit of debt service. Any questions about general government? No. Public safety includes the sheriff's office, marine and forest programs, county jail, district attorney, emergency services, radio communications, victims assistance programs, community corrections, juvenile detention and shelter, and work crew. That is also, we do have multiple funds in the public safety. There is a general fund and there is a community corrections fund as well. So again, all funds, 73% personnel services. I mean, that's basically, that's what our operating funds look like. In the general fund, it goes up to 81%. Health and human services, public health, environmental health, vital statistics, prevention programs, behavioral health services, crisis services, community health center, school-based health services, veterans health services, healthy family services and programs, and developmental disability services. The health and human services funds, there are 3 of them, or I'm sorry, there were 3. As of this year, there will be 4. This budget creates a 4th health and human services fund by carving out the developmental disability services program into its own fund. Again, all funds, it's 53% personnel, materials and services, capital expenditures, transfers out. And Health and Human Services has made a tremendous effort in putting reserves in place for their operations and have been very successful in doing that.
I remember correctly, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, there's actually no reserves in one of the HHS funds.
Yes. So by fund, this is a slightly different breakdown of Health and Human Services, but I thought it would be instructive to show that that program is broken down in rough thirds. Public health, 36%, behavioral health, 34%, community health center, 22%, and the newly established developmental disabilities at 8%. Community services are our parks programs, veterans outreach services, county commons, and county fair. And again, those are by program. You'll see this shifts a little bit because the county fair especially is heavily materials related. And so you have less personal services largely residing in parks and veterans, and the rest being materials and capital kinds of expenditures. And in the general fund, it shifts back just a little bit, personal services, materials and services, little capital, and some transfers. And that's transfers primarily between the county commons and the general fund and other funds. So that's the general overview of the county budget. Commissioner Hunt asked me to put together an analysis of the general fund ending balance. I was not able to get that chart published here, but I can give it to you in a nutshell.
And in fairness to the director, I didn't ask her for this until about 11 o'clock today. So I appreciate the efforts.
Basically, the synopsis of the story is that at the end of fiscal 19, the ending fund balance in the general fund was $10.2 million. This budget at the 17.1% board goal at the end of fiscal 23 is budgeted at $7,051,532. So that's a decline of over $3 million in the space of 5 fiscal years. The general fund budget is approximately, I don't like to do these things by memory, is about $50 million. And so $1 million is a lot. 3 million is a lot, even in a $50 million budget. And so it's not something that is an emergency. It is something that bears attention. It is not unusual for governments to have this kind of pressure where their general fund has burdens that are not readily resolved. That's part of the challenge of government, is there's never enough money to do all the wonderful things that we feel like we need to be doing and that our constituencies want us to do. But that's the role of the budget, is to determine how we allocate those resources. So there will always be pressure on the budget. It's our job to manage that pressure. And in this case, we've spent down some reserves in the last several years. This was delayed a little bit in fiscal 21. If you could see the chart that I did, and I'm sorry you can't, it actually bounced up to $10.4 million in fiscal 21. But that was related to an influx of federal money, COVID money. We were reimbursed for a lot of expenses there. Plus we curtailed a lot of spending. We didn't travel. We didn't do a lot of training. There were a lot of things that we suspended, delayed, and so our fund balance bumped up, but then it turned right back down. Our projection for this year is $8.5 million. So that's our projection for our ending balance for fiscal 22. And this budget again is at little about 7.1. So about $1.4 million in 1 year. Questions?
Over the years I've been on this committee, I've seen that number go up and down. And that to me is not unusual or strange, because that's what it does.
I think that we need to recognize that it's a concern. And while we were successful in building reserves, we reached the peak in 2019. So we've got some structural issues that if we don't address them, we'll continue to drain reserves.
Do you have any questions that I can answer?
Thank you for that report.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
So at this point, unless there are other comments. We have. Oh, looks like Lainey's back.
Can Chair Laney Danforth?
Laney's back.
Laney, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I have an understanding of the process that's going to take place in terms of, because so department heads and elected officials were basically told that our decision packages were not going to be presented. Sorry, one second. We're not going to be presented to the budget committee. Well, we had the opportunity to present it, but that probably wasn't going to happen. And so, Commissioner Hunt, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. If the commissioners adopt the budget and then make changes to it, it sounds like the budget committee is not involved in that process. That's just a decision made by the commissioners. Is that accurate?
Well, I would back up and say, first of all, historically, the M team has reviewed all budget packages, and then based on the M team's recommendations, we've the budget officer and staff have tried to incorporate those decision packages that were agreed to into the budget. My understanding is that frankly, the decision packages that are incorporated are really one-time money, and personnel decision packages were not incorporated because of a lack of supplemental revenues. The Board of Commissioners always has the option to change the budget, as does the Budget Committee, but historically, it's rare that the Budget Committee changes the budget document, because by law it has to be balanced. And I don't know that there's been a time that the Board of Commissioners has changed the budget after it's been approved by the Budget Committee.
Okay, so in terms of personnel requests, I understand that those weren't submitted to the budget committee, but if we have personnel requests or needs in our departments, and we can figure out a way to pay for that out of the money that was allotted to us, do we just have to talk to the commissioners about that and get approval for that? Is that something that we then represent to the budget committee, or what's the process there?
I'll let the budget officer respond.
Traditionally, after the budget is approved by the budget committee and adopted by the Board of Commissioners, in what we call an execution phase of the budget, if there are budget neutral adjustments to be made, then that is something that does not require board approval, but usually we do under policy direction from the Board of Commissioners. And so it's really kind of a discretionary, we take a look at what you're proposing, finance and personnel look at it and make sure that it fits within the structure, the framework of our collective bargaining agreements, historical context, and so forth, and then make a recommendation on whether or not it would be approved. If it's budget neutral, it would not require official action by the board.
Okay. And then just my last question. So the sheriff, obviously he presented some of his needs today, but I know my office in particular really needs an additional DDA position. And so my question is, does the budget committee have the opportunity to vote on that or consider that prior to the commissioners adopting the budget? Meaning, yes, there's no increased revenue, but does the budget committee have the opportunity to say, well, we do have some money in our contingency fund and we think that, public safety is important. And so therefore we're going to dip into that fund to pay for those personnel costs. I guess my question is that something that the committee's going to do? Like, will they vote on what the sheriff presented today or not? And if not, why?
That is at the budget committee's discretion.
Okay, thank you.
I can remember once, probably 15, 18 years ago, where instead of completing it in May, it was the middle of June, tail end of June, when the budget committee met. And I can't remember why we had to meet so late to make it happen. I have no memory of why. But it was done.
I guess as a budget committee member, I would find it difficult to vote or to bring to a vote either the sheriff's request or the district attorney on the basis of just hearing it for the first time as we sit down. That's just not kind of how I work. But I think it's a valid question as to the process. I just think it's a little late at this.
Well, I think we shouldn't confuse the budget process with the normal requisition and hiring process of the county. I mean, anybody can make a request for staffing. There's a requisition process, there's a hiring process. If that requisition requires an adjustment to the budget, that's something that would involve the finance director and certainly be a part of the discussion and whether or not that requisition was approved to be filled. And that can happen anytime. It doesn't have to be just at the budget hearing.
I had a follow-up question for DA Danforth. Can you hear me?
Yep, can you hear you?
Okay, all right, thank you. I cut out there, and I think I missed the first part of your question, but I think I'm understanding. So the follow-up question I had, I just want to again make sure I'm understanding what you were saying is first you were kind of asking about budget neutral changes within the budget you were allotted making changes, but then you asked about an additional DDA position. And so that was a need beyond the budget. That wasn't budget neutral, that particular thing that was needing more budget. Do I have that right?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yes, so there are some things that would be budget neutral, but yes, I was referring to a DDA position that would require additional funding. I don't think it would require much. I think it would be probably $30,000 to $40,000 a year. But I guess my question and concern is that I didn't prepare a comprehensive decision package because of discussions that we had with the M team and with the county administrator. And I totally understand that. I get that we have to make those decisions, but at the same time, when we have personnel needs, I guess the best way to put it is we were dissuaded from presenting those packages to the budget committee. And so for the, I didn't come with all my statistics and the reason that we need it. I have all of that information. I didn't present it. But I also didn't understand, I guess, that the budget committee wouldn't be the one to deliberate on those requests down the line. It would just be the commissioners. If that makes sense.
That is my understanding.
I think that's been the way it's traditionally been handled.
Okay.
It seems like a kind of a timing of process issue.
Yeah, again, as I said earlier, anytime a department head wants to make a requisition for a person and can justify the funding, that can be considered anytime throughout the year.
Right.
They don't have to necessarily be able to justify the funding, but it probably leads to a better outcome.
Okay. So what process then do we need to follow? Because I'm sure I'm probably not the only one in this position, but I didn't present the comprehensive decision package based on those discussions. And so what process do I need to follow now to make those requests when it would cost additional money?
I'll defer to county administrator.
At this point, we can do a couple different things. One, we still have and can have another scheduled budget committee meeting in June, which case you could submit it. The second one would be to go through the process of adopting the budget, fulfilling the requirement from our timeline, and then coming back and identifying what Commissioner Hunt has identified, and is one that I strongly recommend too as well. I haven't been here long enough. I've had 20 hard days of eyes on this budget, already looked at some clarification associated with it. And I think as I get more comfortable with understanding where all the elements are of this budget and what they look like in the future, it'll give me a better idea of making stronger recommendations to you and to the budget committee and the commissioners as it relates to our cash flows, our opportunities, and then hopefully be able to achieve that. We had a multitude of departments requesting personnel. And when we look at our budget and we look at the policies of the commission and the budget committee, particularly on our contingencies, there wasn't a lot of leeway to be able to undertake additional personnel immediately without getting us to a point where we had a better handle of what our contingencies, particularly in the general fund, would be. So I'm asking for everybody's patience on this because I'm trying to get a better handle on this. And the key element, and I said this back in October of last year, I said one of the key elements that would impact our budget, before I was even hired, in my interview process, I informed the commissioners and the management team that the number one issue that would confront our budget would be the cost of inflation. And I know the management team looked at me, the M team looked at me kind of skewed. And I don't think that they recognized what we're now into. But that has been an increase, substantial increase in the context of impact on our budget. And I think much more so than what they originally were considering. I don't know where this goes yet. I'm concerned about it. And so a more conservative approach to our budget this year has been taken, probably because of me and being new, and also because of the externalities of inflation on it. But I'm hoping that once we get through the process, that'll enable me to take a look back at this and then come back and sit with the M team and their request and be able to come back to the commission and possibly make these kind of recommendations over a period of time.
Thank you. Can I just have one more follow-up? If you can still hear me, I don't know if you can.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm just going to speak really frankly. I would like to present personnel requests to the budget committee in June. I might be alone in that, but my thought is that department heads and elected officials should present their requests, and the budget committee can look at all of them and say, well, no, they're all denied, or, we think that these things are a priority, so we're going to pull from the contingency. I know I personally would like the budget committee to be involved in that decision. I don't think it's a secret, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I don't think it's a secret that there has been issues between the DA's office and the commissioners, and I hope that wouldn't continue in the future. But when it takes me 10 weeks to get Abby Dorsey in the door as the detective, I don't have a lot of confidence that if I personally approach the commissioners with that request, that it would be granted. And so I just think that the more that we can have more eyes and ears to make those decisions, that would be my request. Again, I might be alone in that, but did want to just give my opinion. And if afforded the opportunity, I would happily present my request to the budget committee.
Well, the budget calendar's already been published, and this is the last meeting of the budget committee this year. That's not to say that things could be changed. I'm not sure about budget law, though. We do have to have the budget approved by the budget committee and adopted by the Board of Commissioners prior to July 1st.
So where does that leave us?
Well, I don't know where it leaves us because of some of the legal issues. The sheriff had his hand up.
You can finish that issue with something.
I don't know. Kristen Yule's not here. Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen, you're hiding behind. I don't know what the budget law is.
So as you've indicated, any kind of personnel requests go through our process, our requisition process. So
Could you ask Kristen to come to the front and speak in the microphone, please, for the record?
Thank you. County Counsel Kristen Yule.
Good evening, Budget Committee. Kristen Yule, County Counsel. So I think as you indicated, there's no reason why requisitions can't go through the normal process, just like all department heads go through, where you make personnel requests and then that gets evaluated based on funds and other needs. So that's my input.
You know, one of the big advantages of the M team is that department managers and elected officials were able to make presentations to, you know, their fellow directors and fellow elected officials that in theory have an understanding of the different challenges or more complex understanding of the challenges that go into preparing a budget and balancing that budget. And that's one of the reasons that I've always been a supporter of M-team decision packages and the M-team's involvement in the preparation of the budget. But as Council Yule's already pointed out, the requisition process isn't affected by the budget process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacobson.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Yeah, Council answered part of my question, but I guess I was just going to put our public vendors on the spot because I think part of that was kind of addressed to you, and I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Anyone would like to share?
I think it feels awkward to go into very detailed minutia of different departments.
Yeah, well, I think,
personnel
you know,
issues.
excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. You know, I think, as I indicated, there's an opportunity for the sheriff to work with the finance director and the county administrator and others and present his situation. The DA certainly is welcome to make a requisition for an additional person. And I think those activities can parallel the process that we go through in approving a budget and then submitting that budget to the Board of Commissioners for final adoption. I mean, I don't see that they're mutually exclusive.
Two different things, but they
Yeah.
can be parallel. That's what I'm
I
looking
mean, the
at.
budget gets adjusted. The budget's only a plan. It gets adjusted several times a year.
Yes, it does.
So I think we're just.
And that's not to
positioned
diminish the issues that the others have brought forward. It's just to say there's a process.
there is a process, whether it's the road department needs another grader driver or a DA or sheriff's department. Two different things.
So, I mean, it's not to speak for the chair, but does that help the budget committee members?
Think so. Okay. Yes, Sheriff. I've got to keep my head on a swivel here.
I was trying to look at the right time to do this. I just maybe want to clarify, since it seems like it's probably my fault that we've got into this discussion with decision packages. This year we did like we normally do, where the department heads and elected officials presented their decision packages for the MT meetings. This year it was a little different. We didn't have those extensive discussions about the decision packages with all the department heads and elected officials like we have done in the past. I don't know if it was just because there wasn't available resources to accommodate them, if it was the mix of the rescue plan money coming in to help offset those costs, or what the reason was. But usually by the time they come to this committee, just like Ms. Dawn was reporting, not to get into the minutia of the entire budget, usually those decision packages are either yes or no, and they're built in, or they're not by the time they come to you. I've worked extensively with Mr. Johnson on our other decision packages. This wasn't the only one we have. We didn't have any personnel ones, but we had others for equipment. And as it was alluded to earlier, a lot of those were taking off the decision package as far as out of the general fund and put into the rescue plan money to accommodate and pay for. Radios are one of those, records management system, other things that we had that went through there. When I was looking back through everything, I realized this was one that kind of was still stuck out in limbo. And that's why I thought it was best to bring this forward now, because it was kind of one of those, initially it was like, I think somebody said, well, yeah, that seems like a no-brainer. You had it before, had it again, but there was never, and I even asked them to share right at the beginning of the meeting. I'm like, did this one go through or not? And we didn't know. So I thought, okay, it was a good opportunity to present that question to the budget committee to see where it was and how we could work it to where that it was back in place again so that we could have it. So I didn't mean to disrupt the whole thing by bringing up a decision package for it, but it was just one that was stuck out in limbo. And usually those things are clarified before, and we usually don't present our decision packages once we get to the budget committee. It's happening kind of behind the scenes. I do remember in 2011 was specifically because I was making the request where it was one time that we did come outside the M team requests and decision packages. That was when we hired back an emergency manager from the layoffs in 2008, 2009. The timing was just right on that one because we just had in March the Japanese tsunami that came over, and realized that we really needed that position, and that was one that the budget committee did approve outside of the other. But it was also one that the commissioners were also privy to before it actually got to this meeting and were in support of. So it's just different workings of how that one went about back in 2011. Came about. Just wanted to kind of provide some history and to maybe apologize that I didn't mean to bring this topic all around one decision package that we had. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Are there any other comments? Committee, do we have anybody in the audience who would like to comment?
Okay.
No, I think we have a.
Yep, this is Ron here.
My name is Ron Pierre. I live in Depot Bay, and I have the unique distinction, I think you would say, being representing a very unique group in this county. In 2017, Sheriff Landers put out a call for community volunteers countywide to form a community advisory group. And I was fortunate enough to be selected to be one of the 12 members of that group. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I want to talk and advocate for Sheriff Landers and his approach to the management and his approach to what he's discussed with you all in the budget process. So I have an extensive background in working with law enforcement issues from Los Angeles County to Humboldt County. I'm a retired Air Force colonel and have been worked extensively in the area of some law enforcement and communities for a long number of years. So I've enjoyed that. But the real high point of moving to Lincoln County was being able to be part of the 12-person Sheriff's Advisory Group. And that 12-person group was not just a bunch of folks that were thrown together. It was selected and background checks were completed by Curtis. And we all think we're very fortunate to be part of that, but it's a very, I guess, informed group is the best word to use, because the sheriff has brought us into the budget process, to the law enforcement issues. He's brought us into his plans, and more importantly, brought us into the leadership style that he uses with everything from the jail to the patrol force. So three things really come to my mind when I want to advocate as a member of the community advisory group for the Lincoln County Sheriff. First of all, there is consistency and continuity in management. And I think with what the sheriff presented tonight, you can see that each of the programs he has put on the table have evolved year by year. And those two factors stick out throughout the whole episodes and the whole experience of working with what he has on board. He's a very good sheriff, and you all are very fortunate. He has taken the issues, whether it's a drug issue like we have right now, or an inflation issue, and he's ameliorated that process through everything he does, whether it's nurses, and I think we saw an example of that tonight. But he has been a very strong advocate for the processes he used to make this a very efficient law enforcement agency. The consistency and continuity that Sheriff Landers presents in the management of his department shows and I'm talking as a citizen and representing the 12 people on the community advisory group, but those two factors, consistency and continuity in management, start at the very bottom of his organization and go to the top. And you can see it in the people that work for him and the people that have at stake in what happens in Lincoln County, whether it's patrol or whether it's the jail.
Ron, excuse me, I just want to let Chair know if you're following the 3-minute rule or not. We are at 3. So.
Okay, if I get to 3, let me know.
You are.
Okay, I apologize for that, and I will wrap it up. When you look at evaluating the role of a law enforcement agency within a community, and I've learned this over the years, my most recent experiences in Humboldt County in Northern California. And when you look at evaluating the experiences of the law enforcement agency in a community, you have to look at the value added of everything from drug programs to the patrol issues to how you adapt to the changes that have come down in state law. You have to realize how that impacts the person that's actually on the street. So whether it's somebody in Lincoln City or somebody over in the eastern part of the county, our sheriff's department is very good. So I wanted to speak on behalf of the Sheriff's Advisory Group and tell you that we support the management style and the leadership, particularly the leadership of Curtis Landers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierre.
Chair, that is the only person we have signed up out here.
Before you move on, I might point out, I believe that Susan Woodruff's husband is in the audience, and he's a member of that advisory committee.
There's 3 of them over there.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I thought I recognized you. I don't recognize the other gentlemen. My apologies.
Rick Booth.
Oh, right, sure, Rick. Behavioral Health Advisory Committee.
Behavioral health.
Took me a second.
We got a few hats that I have.
Yeah,
We are a very diverse group.
and a good group, an effective group.
I can see that. Very clear. Okay,
No other physical or virtual comment.
okay.
And so if I may, procedurally, you would then move to close the public hearing on the
Go ahead.
budget.
Do that.
I just have a brief comments about the budget form itself. kind of seconded what he said about no notes. I think it's very difficult for us to really get a sense of the dynamics of all the different programs, what's, what are the changes that are happening? And we can look at the budget, we can compare, personal services to materials and services and against the sources, but it doesn't have any life and it doesn't even have page numbers. So, I mean, there's this wonderful index that says on what page everything is, but then there's no pages on the document. So, and I know it's a tremendously big thing and I'm sure it takes hundreds of hours to put together. So I don't want to be critical, but it certainly is not an easy, it's not an easy thing to deal with without some more substance as to, for each department or each fund, what's happening, what's changing, what's growing, what's not growing. I think that would be just make my job a whole lot easier, but of course it would make your job more difficult.
We certainly are working on making improvements.
Well, in fairness, aren't the department directors and electeds working on commentary for the budget that will be incorporated into the final document when it's adapted? I know, I'm just saying that it's not an oversight. It's not intentional. We recognize the need. And unfortunately, we weren't able to meet the time deadline to get everything put together, but your comments are valid. Next year, it should be better.
Are we closing public comment and then continuing discussion, or are we doing?
Yes.
Discussion?
Yes, you would still be
Yes,
free
this
to
would be
discuss.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
This is a discussion. For us, the public input is finished.
Okay. So, I mean, Commissioner Hunt brought up a point of we should be concerned about level of reserves seeming to continue to dip. I know it sounds like that is something that the county is going to be working on, staff are going to be working on over this next year. I mean, it seems like we've met our target this biennium, but I hear what you were saying. And I'm unclear what the procedure is. I am also new to the budget committee. Will the budget committee be brought in the loop as the year progresses to talk about progress being made and potential ideas? And do we weigh in on that, or how does that work?
Lincoln County, as far as I know, I'm still relatively new, does not have a history of doing that. That's not to say that that's not possible, particularly if some significant shift was planned. But that is not something that is formalized in local budget law. It's really at the preference of the Board of Commissioners and the county administrator.
But we do periodically get reports at the Board of Commissioner level, and those reports would be available.
Yes.
And I guess I would just know also, I did watch the team meeting and I found that extremely helpful and getting more familiar with the county budget and different departments, and you get to hear some of the nuances there. I found that very helpful.
Yeah, I've never been involved with any after budget committee meetings, but I have had input to the different budget or commissioners, and have received information that I've requested.
And I will speak for the budget director, but I know if you have questions, she'll be happy to answer them at any time.
That is correct.
Okay, then any further discussion?
Okay, sorry, I can.
Go ahead.
I'll make them work.
Go ahead.
I do really appreciate the need for hiring staff, and because it is contributing to burnout and services not being able to be provided. I know inflation is very high. We're likely going to hit a recession, and I don't think this is the time for us to be cutting services or hiring of personnel. So I'm glad that there's not currently any proposed vacancy savings at this time. I think it would behoove us to get the county fully staffed or as close to full staff as possible. And next fiscal year, we'll see where we're at. And anyway, so just.
I'll just comment that this budget does include the use of reserves to balance it. So that's an issue that if we continue to roll it forward, will have to be addressed.
Yeah, I think we've been down to the point where 7 cents in our pocket or something. Not much. We had no research.
Let's see.
Okay. Then at this point, I guess looking for some motions.
Well, I think if there's no more discussion by the budget
Right.
committee, then we would move to the approval process.
Okay, let's move to the approval process. I think we're done with this discussion. Do I
Mr.
have?
Chairman, Commissioner Jacobson had her hand up.
Oh, sorry about that.
Hi, thank you. Actually, I don't have a question at this time. Sorry for the confusion.
I was just scratching my head.
Okay, thank you. The print is too small or my eyes are too bad. I can't tell what's coming up. Do we have any motions? I think we could start with the elected officials' compensation.
No, if you want to go, well, no, this is elected officials
Yeah, no,
compensation.
yeah.
I don't want to do that
I'll
one.
do that.
I think it's better
Okay,
to
Susan.
stay out of it.
I move to approve the recommendations of the County Compensation Board for elected officials' compensation commencing July 1, 2022.
Do I hear a second?
I will second.
All in favor, signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Aye. Yes.
and that leaves nobody opposed.
Commissioner Jacobson?
Oops, I think I was muted.
Okay. And what about the Transportation Service District? Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the Lincoln County Transportation Service District 2022-23 budget as submitted to this committee and to authorize a property tax levy at the permanent rate of 0.0974 or 9.74 cents per thousand, and that these taxes be imposed and categorized for the tax year 2022-23 upon the assessed value of all taxable property within the county in accordance with law as of July 1st, 2022.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah. All in favor? Aye.
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 Don't
Thank
hear any
you.
opposed. Next motion. Solid waste.
I don't have the statement.
Oh, you don't have it. All right.
I'll just make one up.
Sorry.
We just fixed that.
You're supposed to just jab me and I'll let you know.
All right, I move to approve the Lincoln County Solid Waste Disposal Service District 2022-23 budget as submitted to and amended by.
No
Sorry,
amendment.
Just submitted to.
Yeah.
Submitted to this committee.
Submitted to this committee.
All in, is there a second?
I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. And the last motion.
Last one on this page.
No, that's on that page.
I move to approve the Lincoln County Animal Services District fiscal year 2022-23 budget as submitted to this committee and to authorize a property tax levy at the permanent rate of 0.11 or 11 cents per thousand, and that these taxes be imposed and categorized for the tax year 2023 upon the assessed value on all taxable property within the county in accordance with law as of July 1st, 2022.
Second, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Now the Lincoln County Extension Service District budget.
I move to approve the Lincoln County Extension Service District fiscal year 2022-23 budget as submitted to this committee and to authorize a property tax levy at the permanent tax rate of 0.0451 or $4.51 per thousand, and that these taxes be imposed and categorized for the tax year 2022-23 upon the assessed value of all taxable property within the county in accordance with law as of July 1, 2022.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And the last one,
Motion regarding the Lincoln County budget. I move to approve the Lincoln County fiscal year 2022-23 budget as submitted by this committee and to authorize a property tax levy at the permanent tax rate of $2.8202 per thousand for general operations, and that these taxes be imposed and categorized for the tax year 2022-23 upon the assessed value on all taxable property within the county in accordance with law as of July 1, 2022.
I'll
second,
second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any other information needs to come before this committee? Hearing none. Meeting's
No
adjourned.
information needs. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for participating and helping us through this. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie.
Even though we're adjourned, I'd like to thank Sue Woodruff. She stepped up 2 years ago, and I know I had to twist her arm and Ray's arm, but appreciate your service these last 2 years.
Thank you. So what's the term of this?
Pardon me?
Yeah, and the same goes for Kristen. We had a very late, a late drop off our budget committee.
It's terminal.
You lost it there, okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
I was trying to say, you said you did it for 2 years, so I gave you.
Oh,
John, you were on the budget committee. I was on it as a lay person, as a citizen
Mhm.
person back